Pearce is a life coach, holy yoga instructor, retired eye doctor, and recent empty nester.
Mm.
Gosh, I feel like I need so many of her areas of expertise in my life right now. She and her husband, Bill, are still best friends. And after 31 years of marriage, they have 3 children, Ryan, Morgan, and Casey. And her passion is to connect with women and help them see God at work in their lives and to live their best life right where they are. Please join me in welcoming Karen Pearce.
Well, hey everyone. I'm actually setting an alarm because when I get talking about parenting, I could go for hours. But I'm so happy to be back here at Mothers Together. If you heard my last talk, you know that mom's programs like this are huge for me. In fact, it was my lifeline when I was in your shoes. And in fact, I brought a picture of my family. Let's see if I can find it. When they were probably around the ages of your kids. So my youngest, Casey, staring, she just woken up. She was a few months old. Morgan on the left was 2.5, and Ryan was 5.5. And then on the right side of the screen are all of them grown up. We didn't lose any. And when I look back at the young picture, it kind of kills me that I have wisdom about parenting now, and I had no idea what I was doing back then. And so when I thought about what to talk about today, I really thought back to what would be the top 1 to 3 things that I wish I could go back in time and teach myself, so that way I would give my kids a better experience in our house, that they would grow up even better than they are right now. And so that's my plan today. At that time, I just felt like all I did, and you can wave if you agree with this, but my parenting was trying to keep peace in the house, trying to keep everybody happy. And then when peace was disturbed by naughty behavior or whatever, I would go over and react to that. And so I know Bill and I, we kind of felt like we were in a constant state of overwhelm. And we felt like the Mercy Me song, our best was never good enough. And so if you can relate, then I think you're going to come out with a few tips today. I would love for you to react in the comments, and I'm going quickly through this material because I want to have time for Q&A at the end. And so if you hear me say something that doesn't make sense, or you want to ask a question, jot it down, and we're going to leave hopefully about 10 minutes at the end for questions. And if you don't have questions, maybe I'll add a few more things. So what I'm going to teach you today are the things that Bill and I came up with that helped us avoid overwhelm and feel more in control and confident in our parenting. And I like to call it becoming a student of our children. And I'm going to teach you what that means and what we did. But what happened over the years as we figured this out slowly was we began to become way more proactive in our parenting. And so what I'm going to help you learn are ways to be proactive instead of always reacting. It helped us, I believe, teach our kids to know themselves so they could better navigate life and down the road and have stronger self-esteem. And the most important thing for us as Christian parents is I felt like we were better able to show God's unconditional love to our kids. And so if any of those sound good to you, I think you're going to like what I have. But before teaching you how to be a student of your child, I want to cover 2 foundational things that over time, Bill and I really kind of figured out. The first is, as parents, we need to be really clear on what our role is versus God's role. Over time, Bill and I realized that these are not our kids, and we are not executing our strategy, our vision, and shaping these kids to be who we think they should be. No, we are partnering with God. And if you had a chance to look at any of the handouts I sent over, I sent 2 of my favorite parenting scriptures. One of them is part of Psalm 139, and then the other is Ephesians 2:10. And both of them remind us as parents that God created our children. He looked all over heaven and chose your particular child to go into your womb at the exact moment that they did. He knew that despite how you feel and how your spouse feels, that you have exactly what it takes to parent that child. And he also created that child with important work to do. And he put inside of them everything that they were going to need in order to do that work. And so our role as parents is to understand that it's not all about us. And in fact, one of my great regrets as a mom is this didn't really come together for me until the kids were older. And if I could go back to when I showed you that picture, I wouldn't let a day go by where I didn't use the language from Ephesians 2:10 on my kids. You're an amazing, mysterious creation. God made you and put you in our family on purpose. Do you know that God has big things for you in the future? You're going to do really cool things. If they have their self-esteem founded on God and his plans for them, there's very little you're going to do to mess your kids up. So that takes a lot of stress off your shoulders. Along those lines, if God knows everything about your kids and he knows all of your strengths and weaknesses, then why wouldn't you go to him daily for help? He knows exactly what's needed in every situation. And so as Bill and I became stronger in our faith over the years, we found ourselves going to God first before we stressed out. And honestly, it was such a relief. It was such a relief to realize that I'm a partner with God and that the outcome wasn't up to me and Bill's abilities. And let me repeat that, because maybe this is the one thing that you're going to remember today. And if you remember this, it's going to take so much stress off your parenting. The outcome of your parenting does not rest solely on your shoulders. You have God. And then he also places you in your Christian community, so you have each other as well. So we want to be clear on our role. Next, we want to be clear on what the goal is. Now, for sure, when our kids were little, and I bet if I talked to most people and I said, hey, what do you want for your kids? What would you say? I want them to be happy. I want them to grow up and be happy. I don't care if they're a garbage man. As long as they're happy, I'm happy. But what Bill and I realized over the years, and I know all of the mentor moms would agree with me on this, happiness is a false goal. It's not a goal. And as Christian parents, and I alluded to this before, our main task is to raise kids that will know God, that will love God, and that will expect to do good in the world. And honestly, isn't that why we're at Mothers Together? Like, I know when my kids were the picture that I showed you, I barely knew God. I mean, I was a brand new Christian. And so I didn't know how to raise children to know God and to love him at all. But I went to this mom's group every single week and I got plugged into our church and I started to try to make time to spend with God because I needed all the help I could get. And so removing happiness as the goal made diligent parenting so much easier. So how do we become students of our children? And that's just my phrase. You may have another one, but I believe it starts with changing our focus. And there's several ways that we can do that. The first, and you may already know this, but for me, when I realized it, it was a huge aha. I'm not even kidding. And I was further along in my parenting than I probably should have been. But we need to focus less on what they're doing, reacting to what they're doing, and seek to understand why. So this is where, as a student of our kids, we're kind of taking a little bit of a step back. And we're thinking about, they're mysterious. And so they're unfolding, they're evolving. And our job as a parent isn't to criticize or punish, but to seek to understand and help them understand themselves. Every behavior, good or bad, has one or more root causes. In the Bible, it's called the overflow of our heart. These root causes are character qualities, they're heart attitudes. Negative ones, it's our sin nature. It's the good that God puts in us. It comes from our heart. And it takes a diligent parent, it takes a student of your child to begin to really study your child and to know these things. Now, once you start looking beyond the behavior to root causes, the next focus change is to start elevating the good. And I can tell you, people who know me, especially my children, will tell you that I did not do a good enough job of this. My personality is very intentional, but I see the mistakes. I'm one of those people that can walk in a room and find the one thing that's wrong. And I had to really work hard on being on the lookout for good. So here's an example of that. Say you come across your daughter sharing cookies with your son. As quickly as possible, and hopefully in the moment, you jump in, get eye to eye with your daughter, and you call out the character quality. Sweetheart, you were so generous with your brother right now. That's really awesome. And I know that it makes God smile. 2 seconds. Suddenly, this child who was doing something nice has a marker in her life. She made God smile. Later on, you may have a scenario where you're now trying to get that same daughter to share a toy that she doesn't want with her friend. Come alongside again, eye to eye. Sweetheart, this is where you need to be generous with your friend and share your toy. I know you don't want to, it's really hard, but guess what? I know you can. Because remember when you shared your cookies with your brother? I know you can be generous. So let's do that now. Now, I'm not saying that it happens overnight, but when you change up your parenting to start looking for ways to elevate the good, that gives you building blocks for future parenting. And so if you feel like I did, where I just went from one negative to another, this is a way to put a positive spin on things. Now, this also helps build up your kids' self-esteem and avoid labels and stereotypes. Because I remember with one of my children who had a propensity towards laziness, the spiral in his head was, I'm a lazy person. And we don't want that for our kids. Another thing that was the big aha for Bill and I was understanding, and I don't remember where we learned this, but understanding that undesirable behavior, those negative character qualities, a lot of times is just immaturity. It could be physical immaturity. They're just physically not capable of doing what you want. But more than likely, it's immature leadership, immature gifting, and inability to manage what they have. And so a parent who's a student of their child will seek to find the positive quality that's waiting to be birthed out of this immaturity. Let me give you an example. When Morgan was the age in those photos, between 2 and 3, honestly, she was impossible for me to parent. She was so strong-willed. So if you have a strong-willed child, raise your hand. She was way more strong-willed than I was. And so trying to punish her or to mitigate negative things I was seeing was nearly impossible, even when she was between 2 and 3. Timeouts didn't work. Taking something away didn't work. Even when she was really little, like, when you have toddlers and you don't want them playing with your keys, so you distract them with something else while you take it away to avoid a temper tantrum, didn't work with Morgan. She was unswayable. And it freaked me out because an unswayable toddler, when you fast forward to 15 or 16, I was like, you can only imagine what was going on in my head, what that was going to be like. So I began to pray about it. And what God showed me was a child who at a young age is so strong-willed that their mother, who they're bonded with and who they're very attached to, can't sway them. Well, you've got a diamond in the rough with that child, because peer pressure is probably not going to sway them as well. And so suddenly, even though it didn't make the moment any easier, a couple of things happened. I realized that I had a rare gift in this child, and I was being asked by God to do the hard work in the moment to help her learn how to obey and to help her learn to submit when she needed to and other things. But the fruit was going to hopefully be a child who would not be swayed to do things that she knew she wasn't supposed to do or didn't want to do. So it empowered me in that moment. It also allowed me to let some of the smaller things go, because I knew that everything was going to be a battle. So it was important that I win the important things. And so it gave me perspective. And so that's where looking for those immature things, when you can find the positive quality, it can really, really put a different spin on your parenting. Another thing that I did to try to focus on elevating the good was, and this was super fun, finding little training opportunities. So for Bill and I, we found that patience and self-restraint and self-control, those were things we wanted all our kids to have, no matter what their wiring or temperament was. And so when they were little, probably by the time Casey was maybe 2, we started baking chocolate chip cookies every week. And some of that was to help my readers start learning to read the recipe and math and things like that. But where it was hugely helpful is we took turns. So we were all clustered around the KitchenAid, and say Ryan was scooping in the 2 cups of flour. Morgan would have to wait before she could do her 3/4 cup of white sugar. And little Casey might be standing on a chair next to me, hot footing it, wanting to put her brown sugar in, and she would need to wait. And we would talk about words like patience and self-restraint and self-control. And sometimes when she was little, I might be holding Casey and saying, okay, it's almost your time. You're going to wait. I know you can wait. You can take your turn, and so on. And we did this every week. And the cool thing was they didn't want to wait. They wanted to jump in, but there was cookies coming. And so rather than getting frustrated and walking away, which is what often happens, we had this awesome thing. There was cookies. Now, down the road, when Bill or I needed them to develop or to show patience or restraint or self-control, again, we could refer back. I know you can do it. It's similar to like when you're trying to get your kids to clean their room and you maybe pay them and you set a timer just to prove to them that they can clean their room in 15 minutes. And then you can refer back to that. So it's the same thing. We're trying to set up opportunities for success and training. Another thing that I had that we loved in our house was a caught being good chart. And so when we get to the handout, you'll see that for each child in each season of life, I was usually kind of loosely trying to build up 2 or 3 positive character qualities. And then, every season there's like 2 or 3 things that just drive you bananas that you need to get a grip on. And so I would put those good things on there, plus the family qualities we wanted. We wanted them to be readers and kind to others and so on, obedient. And so when I caught them without being asked or oversaw them exhibiting these qualities to a friend or to a family member, they would get a sticker. And then once they had so many stickers, we could do something super fun. And it might be a one-on-one date or a little trinket or something. So again, it kept the focus more on doing good. Okay, so with this in mind, if you had a chance to print out the handouts, go ahead and grab them. If you didn't, I'm going to talk about them and you can find them later. But I sent you 3 or 4 things. One of them was a list of my favorite parenting books, because honestly, we sometimes need a lot of help, or at least I did. These are the books that when some of the women that I mentor come to me, I refer them to. Things like birth order and stuff like that. And then my contact info is on the bottom. And so I would love if you would reach out afterwards and let me know if you have any questions or if you need help with anything. Another thing that I sent you was a list of discerning positive qualities through negative traits. This is an old-fashioned list, and people either like it or they don't. If you look at it, you don't like it, throw it out. I don't care. I found it helpful on occasion when I was really at the end of my rope, trying to figure out a positive on a negative behavior, and I was having a hard time not focusing on the behavior. Sometimes this was helpful. So this is a last resort though, because like I said, we start with prayer and start with talking to your husband and to your Christian friends before you go to some list. Okay, and then the last thing is the little handout. And I'm going to go pretty quick through this because I want to leave time for questions. But I did these annually for each kid, and it's not a set in stone thing, but it was helpful for me. This is what Bill and I worked on. It may not be the things that you want to. So I sent this as a Word document so you could make a copy, delete all of the links, delete any notes, and then even add in what you want to work on. So that's totally customizable for you. But for our family, I always wanted to know where they were with God. Because remember, our first job as parents isn't to raise kids that get into Harvard or become doctors or can afford to live in Danville someday. Our first job is to raise children that know God, that love God and that are open to go and do for God. And so, even if you're not sure where your kids are, this is a reminder to you and your role. And this is where, again, being in Mothers Together, accessing your mentor moms, all of these things can help you know what to do at each stage to help point your kids to God. Next, I always wanted to really be clear on the kids' love languages. Now, when your kiddos are young, when they're toddlers, you're guessing on almost all of this, but it gives you a starting point, and then you're going to change and add to it over the years. If you don't know love languages, this is crucial being a student of your child, because it's possible for you as a mom to give love in a way that your child doesn't receive. For instance, if you love with acts of service and you're loving on your kids and serving your family, but your child requires quality time in order to feel love, you're going to have a disconnect. And you could have a child who doesn't feel as loved as they are. So that's a really, really important one, I think. I always like to know their learning style, and those of you who are teachers may have other learning styles. So I may not have these 100% correct, but this will help you personalize your teaching, your discipline, and your communication in a way that your kids can receive it. And then also, when they're in school, knowing your learning style is so empowering. So, for instance, if you're kinesthetic and you have to write everything down, um, it's good for your kids to know that so they can be successful in school. It's always fun to know their emerging personality tendencies and their talents. And this is both for you to understand their wiring, because sometimes what we expect from our kids, they can't change because they're wired. And so it helps us teach them about who they are for navigating life, but it also helps us hold space for who our kids are. And with talents, you're going to want to cultivate those, but you may want to bring other things in to be well-rounded. The next section on the sheet is all about what we were talking about before, looking for the positive and the negative, and then figuring out ways to figure out what the positive qualities are. Now, I usually started by writing down the behaviors because they're easiest to determine. You know what your kids are doing, but don't stop there. Draw an arrow and then seek to find the character qualities and the heart attitudes. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But what I always like to do is, like, say we had a lazy child, I would try to find a piece of scripture that I could both be praying over them, and Proverbs is phenomenal for finding little like snippets of scripture that you can pray, but it's awesome to teach your children. So if a child is struggling with laziness, you can maybe have them memorize a bit of Proverbs. Think about it, that like imagine unleashing adults into the world that know themselves so well that they know how to find scripture to pray over things that they're working on. So you're giving them life skills in addition to trying to raise kids that are going to know God and just be good humans. And then also, is there a Bible character that you can introduce your kids to that either struggles with the same struggle or maybe emulates the good? And so that's a fun thing too, to read those Bible stories to your kids. The Children's Story Bible, I think or Jesus Story Bible is a great one. And this is where Mothers Together and your mentor moms are great help. Okay, quickly, the last two, what life skills do they need to develop at their age? Someday I would love to come and do a whole parenting talk on this, because this is my other, like, I love this. Raising capable kids starts in toddlers. So if you have toddlers, you can start training them to be independent humans when they leave your house. There's a great link that I link to. And then who are their friends? From a young age, your kids are going to gravitate towards certain personality types. And any of you guys with older kids, you know that they don't always gravitate towards the kind of friends that are good for them. And so it's a really good idea to keep your finger on the pulse of who their friends are. Okay, so I just want to conclude with one thing, and then we're going to go to questions and answers. The reason why this kind of parenting is so, so important is how we approach our kids becomes their inner voice. And remember, I said to you before, I wished I had done a lot of this differently when our kids were young. I see in my 21, 24, and 27-year-old, they're incredible humans, but there's language going on in their head. And in fact, I have language in my head that comes from how my mom parented me. And so by swapping out some of these things in our parenting, we're going to create kids that have a healthier voice in their head, that they're precious creations from God. And when we keep God in the center, like I said at the beginning, if you have him in the center, then it's very low chance that you're going to screw your kids up, because you're pointing them to the one that's going to make sure that they're okay. All right, so with that, hopefully you guys have some questions. And so I think Shannon maybe will check the comments. And if you don't, maybe the mentor moms will ask me to, clarify something. So let's turn it over.
Yep. So if you just want to chat me your questions, and then I can help facilitate.
I know sometimes it's hard to take it all in. And if you have a specific scenario with your kids, you're going to be talking about a lot of that. I have 3 questions for your discussions, but if you want to even just give me an example, and we can talk about that as well.
Okay, I think Lynn